Hi everyone, welcome back. So I'm going to now replicate what we did in Postman into Logic App. So I created a new Logic App within Azure, and now going to set the trigger as schedule. So what I want to happen is I want a recurrence, and I want something to happen once a day. So maybe once at night I want this this to run. So I'm going to click at 1 o'clock, and I'm going to set the minutes 00. So now what will happen is this workflow will automatically trigger every day at 1 a.m. I'm going to click the click new step, and I'm going to select an action. Now what I'm going to do, just to save myself from kind of copy pasting, as I'm going to create a variable in here. So click variable, initialize variable, and I'm going to call this API key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set this as a string, and I'm just going to get my API key that I had earlier and go back into my Logic App, and I'm just going to paste it. So now we can just use API key as a variable. So for instance, in the future, if you want to change your API key, you don't have to then find, go through all this and just work out where to change it. You can just literally just change it inside this variable, and that's it. That's it. Makes your life easier. The next step is going to be in HTTP request. Now, if you remember earlier in Postman, what we did was we made a we first need to, in order to call the reports endpoint, we need to get all the campaign IDs. So I'm going to copy this endpoint URL, and the method that we used in Postman was get. Now Logic Apps is quite useful. It's kind of similar to the functionality of Postman, where it has some authentications kind of built in. So that's great. So we'll just use that. So I'm just going to select basic, and in here I'm just going to select just ABC. We can put anything random in there, and then password, I'm going to pass the API key. So what should happen now is when I save this and I run this, it should hopefully call the API, MailChimp's API, and return data back to us, and we should get a status code 200. So everything worked, but I just want to see whether we've got the right data. And that looks good. That looks like the data that we wanted, and we've got status code 200. So I'm going to copy this. So make sure you copy the body and then click designer. I need to now parse this data, because what I want to do is I want to extract the campaign IDs from this data that's been returned. So I'm going to click new step, and I'm going to click data operations, and then I'm going to click parse JSON. Now the content has to be from the previous, one of the previous steps. So I'm going to click HTTP, and I want to parse the body. I could parse the other information that's come back, but I want to parse the body because that's what's containing my data. And then it's asking me to enter in the schema. Now Logic App parse JSON can only work if I provide it a schema. So there's a handy little inbuilt function in here within this tool where I click on this link, and all I got to do is I got to paste in my previous payload, which is the response I got previously, and I paste it into there, and then it should generate me a schema that I can use. So you can see how that has just generated me. It was basically calculated, worked out what type of information I had, like whether it's an array, whether it's a string, integer, and so on. So I'm just going to save that. Now what it's done, what it'll do is it'll parse this information, and all of these different properties like ID, web ID, type, they'll be accessible for me. So I want to access, and I'm going to bring up the JSON viewer again, so we can just see what information we need. So I'm going to paste in that data that I had earlier, and I want the campaign information. I've got two campaigns in here now, and I want to bring back ID, which sits under campaign. So that's what I want. So what I want to do is I want to first what I'm going to do is I want to construct another HTTP request, but I want to append on, so I want to use a different endpoint, which is the reports, and with reports I need to then add on the campaign ID. So I'm going to click HTTP again, and I'm just going to go back into the MailChimp documentation, and I'm just going to find that endpoint information again. I think it was this one maybe. campaigns, no, not that, sorry. So let's just go back into Google, click on reference, and it was reports. So this is what I want. This is what I want. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this, paste it. Oh, sorry. Select the method. No, that doesn't go there. Click get, paste it into there. Click reports /, and then you'll see here within this little viewer, a little pop-up. What it's done is it's basically giving me all the objects within this JSON. So I'm going to now look for ID. I'm just going to look for ID like that, and I'm just going to click ID. And look what's happened. It's basically generated. It was placed this HTTP REST inside a for loop. So it knows that it has to loop through this campaign data. So it knows that there could be multiple records under campaign. So it automatically generated me a for loop, which is great. So that I don't have to worry about whether I've created the right loop or whether I'm at the right level within the JSON. It's done it for me. So now, hopefully, that should work. However, I haven't given it the authentication, so I'm going to click basic, and as before, I'm going to go ABC as my username. I'm going to pass the API key into there. Now, what should happen is this will call and request all the campaign IDs, and then I will pass that. Then I will create another API call, calling each one of those campaigns in a loop. So I've got two campaigns inside this inside my application, and now what I want to do now is extract the data that I get from here. So I'm just going to quickly save this and see whether this runs up till this point. Okay, cool. So that's run, and that ran twice. You see that? That ran twice. So it says this is the first run, and I can click next, and it can click the next one. So you can see here it's appended onto the end of it the campaign ID that I wanted, and that's given me back the information as well that I want for each campaign. So I can click next, and I can see that data as well. So that's exactly what I want. Now what I want to do is I want to extract this information and push it to a CSV file. Now the way you can do that is so I'm firstly going to so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click add action. I'm going to parse this data. Now there's a number of ways you can do this, but I'm going to show you one of the ways, and I might show you another way. I click parse JSON, and it's asking me for the body information for HTTP2, so that's what I got to pass into there. And now it's asking for my schema, so I'm not sure whether I actually copied it into memory. Let me just check. No, I didn't. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this tab, and I've got to go back into my account now. I'm going to go on the last step that I ran, and I'm just going to copy the body, and I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to paste it into there, and that will then again that will create a schema to enable Logic App to parse this data. So once it's parsed this data, I want to store this data. I want to save it into a CSV file. So the way to do that is I want to create a new variable, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array. So I'm going to firstly initialize the variable. I'm going to call it my array, and I'm going to call it of type array. Okay. I'm going to go back into this for loop, and after this parse JSON 2 step, what I want to do is I want to extract this data and store it inside an array. So I'm going to click variables again, and I'm going to click append to array variable. And it's going to ask me which array. So it's only detected one array, so that's my array, and then it's going to ask me what information do you want to pass into this array. So I can send in lots of different types of information. I can even go individually into individually into the objects within this JSON response. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of this. Just going to click the viewer and just delete that and paste that in. And is that the right? Yeah, let me just copy that, go into JSON viewer, just delete this, paste it in there. Oh, that is the right information. Okay, so this is the information from the reports. And actually what I want from here is I don't really care about all this information. I just want to check something actually, guys. I think I've done something incorrectly. So when I ran this reports and this is the output, let's check this emails, bounces, and this does not look the same as what's showing up in here, unless I'm missing something. Okay, let me just paste it into there again. Let me just check. Okay, that's better. I don't know what happened there, but it was just showing me the wrong information in JSON. So you can see this is what I want now. This is the report information. It says bounces, forwards, opens, clicks, and so on. So what I want is I want to extract all of this information into my array. So I'm going to click my array. Now what I can do is I can see that all this data, firstly you've got it's separated by ID, and then it's also got like the next level is bounces, forwards, open. So I'm just going to take all of this data and I'll just parse it in Power BI. However, if you wanted to, you could loop through this data and extract individual elements in here, and when you do that, the logic app will actually create all the loops for you. But I'm not going to do that for this scenario because it will get otherwise a little bit complicated. What I'm going to do is just click the body, and what that will do is that every time this runs, it will just save the body into my array. Now once that's completed, once that's looped through, I want to convert this array that I've created into CSV format, so then I can push it into a spreadsheet. So what I do is then after this for loop is run, I want to click a new action that occurs after this is run, and that's going to be a data operation, and I'm going to create CSV table. And this again, I'm going to ask me what information do you want, and I'm going to pass in my array, and then it's going to basically convert this information into comma separated format. And then I'm going to click another final step, and I'm going to click my OneDrive, and I'm going to just click create file. And now I'm just going to just pull up another, I'm just going to create a new folder. Yeah, I'm just going to create a new folder in here. I'm just click there, go and just try and find it. New folder, and I'm just going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it MailChimp campaign reports.csv. Make sure you always put the extension on the end of that, otherwise it won't be created. Then add the file contents. Now I want to add the contents of this create CSV. Sometimes it doesn't show up in here, but if you just click on see more, it will show it. Just click the output there. So that will parse the output of this previous action as the contents for this action. I'm going to click save, and I've got some other data in here, just ignore that for now. and I'm just going to just put this side by side. So if I run this, hopefully I haven't made any mistakes, and it should execute the entire flow. Okay, and that's run. And that's saying at the moment it's still running. Okay, it's gone 4 seconds, so that's gone a green tick, and that's done. And that's created this file here, and it's still loading, so it's not ready yet. When I get a green tick, hopefully any second now, it will work. Let me see if I can just force it by opening it. Okay, so that's worked. So that's just popped this format, this spreadsheet up. So you can see I've got 2 rows, one for each campaign, and you can see the IDs have already been, that data has already come out in CSV format. So that's perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into Power BI. I'm going to click Edit Queries. And actually I had this in here before. I'm just going to delete that so I can show you it from scratch. I'm going to click New Source, Text CSV, click Campaign Reports, Open. It recognizes the CSV file, and it's in here now. And then some of the information in here, like the bounce information, forwards, and so on, you can just go in here and just transform it. Just click Parse JSON, and it recognizes their records. Just expand them, and you've expanded it. So you can just go through that, whichever, you can go through the whole thing, whichever information you need, and you can and now you've got that data in Power BI. So I hope you found that interesting, and what's great about this method is that this will run automatically. You don't have to push anything, execute anything from now on. It will just run until you stop it. So yeah, so we're gonna show you next one of the other methods. So thank you.